Coming up on Chopper's Politics.
People are still saying they won't publish that because you're a Leaver and they support Remain. Is that right? Is that really right, or just in your head?
No, there was definitely an element of that.
Was there?
What
do they say? What kind of comments did you receive from them?
Well, I was getting it all second-hand through an agent, to be fair, so I wasn't getting this directly face-to-face.
I doubt you'd have taken it. I'm Christopher Hope, also known as Chopper, the chief political correspondent at the Daily Telegraph. And this is Chopper's Politics. Omicron is spreading. That may sound like the tagline from a sci-fi film, but I am of course talking about the new coronavirus strain. Festive functions are being curtailed left, right and centre, despite ministers clamouring to say we should keep calm, carry on and have a mince pie. And we're back to wearing masks inside. It's hard not to channel your inner Grinch. This new variant is of course also having an impact on travel, from quarantine rules to pricey PCRs. So the Chopper's Politics team thought it was timely to sit down with Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, who I've been badgering to come on this podcast since before the pandemic began. Grant Shapps, welcome to Chopper's Politics.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
Great to have you on. You're finally coming after years of asking you.
I think I have been on once before, actually. I think we should fact check this, but I believe I've done it one time before.
So here we are again, and we're facing the problems of Omicron. Is it Groundhog Day all over again for you?
Well, I hope not. I think if this is more of a pause, stop, check the situation, and I hope through the brilliance of science that we'll be able to push on. But obviously we don't know the answers to any of those things until the scientists have had a chance to check. So that's what it is. I don't think it's going right the way back to the bad old days, no.
So where are we in the process? Are we kind of April last year, that kind of level where we were taking measures but we had the vaccine? Where are we?
No, I wouldn't compare
if you're rerunning the whole playbook from the last 12 months.
I wouldn't actually choose a moment in the past and say this is most similar to, simply for the fact that it's been 90% of over 12s have been first vaccinated, 80 whatever percent of second vaccinated. We've got this booster in coming up to a third of arms already.
Yeah.
So we've got the technology we didn't have before. So I don't think this is equivalent to X point in history. And also, with Omicron, unfortunately, there are just a lot of things that we don't know. One thing we do know is we'll have the answers pretty quickly.
How soon?
I was surprised talking to Chris Whitty and Patrick Vallance on this. In a couple of weeks' time, we will have some really good steers on this. So, we've said we will come back in 3 weeks. And within that time, we expect we'll have some decent information. I don't know what it will say, but I think the speed of response, not only in the medical side, not at the scientific side, but actually just the way we responded to it. Last Thursday at 4 p.m, the chief medical officers for the United Kingdom met up. At 5 p.m, ministers were meeting, discussing and agreeing to take action. And that's how fast
the first one came from South Africa the day before, Wednesday, I think, last week.
That's right. And don't forget that mutations are not unusual. They happen all the time. The trick, of course, is to distinguish between the ones that matter and you need to act on and the ones that you can say, that's not of much interest. But I think in terms of speed of response, the UK has led the world. I don't think any other country reacted faster. And I think, if I'm honest, we've learned from the past, which is what I think people don't expect us to have.
Have you overreacted, do you think? I mean, there's of the 9 cases in Glasgow and Lanarkshire, there's been no one put in hospital up there with Omicron. South Africa itself is now panicking about its tourist season because of what the UK led on. Do you think do you regret moving so fast?
No, certainly not. But look, I hope we have. To answer your question, I don't think we have, given what we know at this moment in time. But it's been a calibrated response. I see the opposition calling for, lock it all down, pre-departure tests, pile the cost on the traveller. A lot of your listeners are people who love to travel, and I don't want us to go back to the bad old days, and we need to know the answers to things. So we've a calibrated response, which is an up to 2-day PCR test, which, by the way, you can take as you come through the airport or as you're on your way home. You don't have to wait 2 days to take it, and you could have the answer, if you're a morning flight later that day or the next day. So the quarantine period could be as little as a day.
Are you looking at any European countries to go on the red list at the moment?
So we're obviously always keeping the lists under review, but right this moment, no. Sorry, I should just say as a segue here, we're recording on a Wednesday,
Wednesday
and you're telling me it's going
lunchtime.
out on Friday. So as we sit here, no, we'll keep a very close eye.
And the criteria to remove countries, what is that? I mean, is it cases per 100,000? We're not even anywhere near those numbers yet, but what's the
No,
criteria?
it's not, simply because until the scientists tell us, I don't know, one outcome could be them telling us you can have these cases. Fortunately, it's at the milder end of the disease. I'm not saying this is the case. Let's say
don't know.
the scientists came back with this. And in any case, Delta, in countries that have a lot of Delta, it tends to get squeezed. That would be very different from them coming back and saying, we're very concerned, it has very severe impacts. And I'm afraid we're just going to have to be a little bit patient. Our colleagues at Porton Down, the scientists there,
They're working
have
now.
it. They have it. They're working on it. They're growing the culture that are required. They're testing it against the blood serum of people who've been infected. They're doing all of the things incredibly fast, both here and around the world, things which wouldn't have been possible a year ago.
So 10 days away, we'll hear more.
That's about right, and 3 weeks from Monday is the actual deadline to make some decisions.
And pre-testing before flights, are you keen on that? That's another idea.
Well, lots of countries do require, if you're going to them for pre-testing. We're not requiring that at the moment. I did hear, in fact, I heard the leader of the opposition calling for that from the dispatch box at Prime Minister's Questions this week. Do you want to kill off the travel sector again without knowing that you need to, or do you want to take the right level of calibrated response? And this government thinks we should take a calibrated response, which doesn't take us, right back to the beginning of this.
Do you detect a political dividing line in the approach towards coronavirus, that more left-wing inclined politicians are quite keen to impose lockdowns or impose restrictions, and the right is keen to keep the economy going on helping private companies to keep going?
I don't think it's a left versus right thing, but I would say that, I'm the Transport Secretary. I believe in travel. Let me put it out there. I believe people
fly
should be able
planes.
to travel. I fly a plane. I drive a car. I cycle a bike. And
crash
sometimes
bikes.
come off it. I take the buses. I go on ships. I believe in transport. And I don't want to see a world where we're always finding excuses to restrict it. Of course, you've got to respond responsibly. That's what I think we've done.
Big issue for our readers and listeners is the cost of PCR tests when you go travelling. Can you cap them? Are they extortionate? They tell them that they are.
Well, I think a better solution is to have competition really drive down the cost of them. There are a lot of competitors in the field. I think that one of the issues has been that although there are a lot of competitors, the number of labs who ultimately process them, needs to continue to expand. And it's worth reminding listeners, we started from basically zero facilities in this country 18 months ago, and they've been built up from scratch, government, but private labs as well. So I'd like to see the market used to bring the prices
But you
down.
won't step in and cap.
Well, we've seen a lot of downward pressure on testing. Of course, we'd got back to using lateral flow. Now we're having to use PCR because you get that instantaneousness of being able to sequence the genome and see exactly what was there important in this case. But the market should be used to drive it down, and we'll keep encouraging the market to do that.
And these vaccine passports will only need to reflect a booster jab to be in force.
Yeah, well, actually, I travelled last week, as it happened, for government to do investment work, and I was surprised when I opened my NHS app, discovered that actually my booster, which I have already had, was already showing on there as a certificate. Of course, the question is when people will require you to have had a third vaccine, you have the booster.
That might be February next year.
And we don't know the answer.
No.
The simple message to everybody is A, that is bound to come. Right? Countries who are at the moment saying you're fully vaccinated after 2 are bound to switch to saying you need 3. So book your booster. If it's been 3 months since your second jab, you can. And secondly, of course, we will also have to look at it at some point as well. So let's be realistic. Encourage everyone to get the boosters.
Yeah, and the people who refuse to take their vaccines, will they find life increasingly difficult, do you think, in this country? They might have more quarantines automatically imposed.
Yeah, not to be awkward to those people, but actually to protect everybody else. I think it is just inevitable that the norm for travel globally is going to be, have you been vaccinated? In the same way as for many, many years, if you've wanted to go to certain countries, you can't go without a yellow fever certificate, passport. But I think we can make the process of travel much easier. For example, if you are vaccinated, and we know we can see it in our NHS app, when you book your ticket online or with your travel agent, you upload the certificate or the number, the unique number or whatever, job done, and there's no fatting
Pretty
around.
soon, before really from next year, if you want to go overseas on holiday, you'll need a vaccine passport.
Without being clairvoyant, I'm pretty certain you're right, Chris, because can you see between now and next summer Spain saying, don't worry, just come. No,
come as you are.
It's not going to happen, is it? So clearly you need your booster, you get that. And then what we really want to work on, as I say, is the automation.
Are you going on holiday this Christmas?
No, not this Christmas.
Or next February?
I've got nothing booked at the moment.
Summer?
Sadly.
Would you book? Why have you booked nothing at the moment? Would you? Is that because
specifically because we have two dogs, Mr. Crumble and Tequila,
Right.
and we couldn't find a dog sitter. Anyone out there? Mr. Crumble's very old.
A dog is sitting near Welling will be in touch.
Mr. Crumble's extremely old. He's 15 or so, and so a tricky dog to babysit. So that is specifically the reason we're not going anywhere.
But would you book? I mean, a lot of our listeners, readers, they want to go skiing in February half term. They want to go way before Christmas. Should they book?
I don't want to discourage people from booking. I think I must be realistic with people, just to say we live in this coronavirus world. We've got the Omicron variant at the moment. I don't know if there'll be other things. But as I said before, I'm transport secretary. I run the department for transport. I always point out the
Not
Americans,
against transport.
I always the Americans have a department of transport, and I always point out to my own colleagues, my own civil servants, we are in favour of transport. So we are the department for transport, and so I don't want to encourage people not to, but do it with your eyes open when you book. Look at the refunds, look at the change of booking date, both on the travel and the stay. Be sensible with it. Have fun.
Staycation next year for you, or do you plan on overseas
holiday?
holiday?
I always like to get a break.
Somewhere outside Britain next year, or flying somewhere.
And despite the excellent summer weather we sometimes get, I think the risks of a bad summer are reduced by going somewhere warmer. But as I say, as long as you've made sure your tickets are refundable, flexible rather, and that you where you stay takes respect of what's ever happening at the time, go book, but just know that you've got the insurance in place.
It's not about transport, but parties are being cancelled right now as we speak. I mean, a lot of parties I'm seeing on Twitter, and I know some have been cancelled. Would you cancel your departmental party?
No, and I'm not going to. Look, we've not changed, other than saying, as an extra precaution, public transport, crowded places like shops, wear your mask. Again, nothing else has changed. We haven't gone back to stage X of lockdown or phase 2 of this or whatever. We're simply being precautionary.
It's plan A still, isn't it?
It's plan A still, exactly it. It was simply being precautionary whilst the scientists can tell us more about Omicron. And as soon as they have, I very much hope we'll be able to go back. We'll have to wait and see what they say. And certainly looking forward to, I'm not abroad, we're at home, I'm looking forward to a completely normal Christmas. And specifically, the one thing we are asking people to do is go and get the booster.
Moving on into other areas of the Department for Transport, HS2 is a big policy. Now, are you disappointed about the fact that it was amended 10 days ago now to be less beneficial for the North?
Absolutely not. It's my policy. I stand by it. It's not just good, it's brilliant in as much as people won't have to wait until 2043 to have the benefits of HS2. They'll get many of the benefits much sooner, like literally during this decade. HS2 was invented 15 years ago. Times have changed, and we're actually building a lot more railway than we planned to do at the time. No one was talking about building Northern Powerhouse Rail, that bit across the top. No one was talking about Midlands Hub and Connect at the time, but we're building those things. I have never heard such an extraordinary response. For example, I think I'm right in saying the leader of the opposition calling it crumbs. I've never heard £96 billion of expenditure described as crumbs before. Remember, we're going to build another high-speed rail line, which was never in HS2, between Warrington to Manchester to West Yorkshire, right? That was never in there, but we announced it the other day. So this is, of course, it's reshaped against what we're going to deliver with much updated plans. But for goodness sake, it's a better plan. And if you live in Huddersfield or Wakefield or Doncaster, to name but 3 off the top of my head, Nottingham, Derby, I mean, the list just goes on. This is a much better plan than you would have got for the original HS2. So don't just blindly carry on with something which is out of date.
Do you understand the upset about the changes to the Northern Powerhouse line? There's the concern about it, isn't there? I mean, you've got this Councillor Louise Gittins from Transport for the North saying that it's unacceptable to the North, the plan set out in the integrated rail plan.
Well, my question to Louise Gittins is, Which bit is unacceptable? Is it 4 times as much capacity over the Pennines? Is it delivered this decade rather than the 2040s? Is it 33 minutes from Manchester to Leeds or 12 minutes from Bradford to Leeds? I'm not sure who she thinks she's representing. Certainly not to citizens of places like Doncaster, Middlesbrough, who'll be getting a direct train to London just in the next few weeks, actually. People in Sheffield, Huddersfield, who benefit massively from this. Warrington with high-speed rail. I don't mind a bit of political knockabout, but let's live in the real world. We're building a lot of stuff, and we're going to do it a lot quicker for the Northern Powerhouse.
And you're reopening formerly closed beaching lines, aren't you? That will carry on.
I tell you what, my most I've loved every day in the job as Transport Secretary, but none more so than reopening the Dartmoor line. I travelled on that first train. It takes communities who have for decades been cut off. Literally, if you wanted a job, if you wanted to go and meet someone, if you wanted to have fun, you had to get out of the place you were in because the missing infrastructure meant it was never worth building it there somehow. And these forgotten, left behind towns, this is a brilliant levelling up example. It's incredible to see the energy, it comes.
And levelling up is in the West Country as well as the North, isn't it?
It's everywhere. It's right across the country, and the South West has a very good claim to wanting to be levelled up. Bringing back these railways is a brilliant way to do it. I'm looking forward to opening many more, and perhaps the next one will be, I don't know if the scheduling is exactly right, but the next one will be up in Ashington, Newcastle, Blythe.
We know you're big into transport. You're for transport. How's your electric car?
It is beautiful, actually. Really no downside at all.
Okay, no downside. Come on, Grant Shapps.
If you are capable of remembering to go home and charge your mobile phone, so you go out and it's on 100%, you are capable of driving an electric car. Now, I know this won't apply to everybody. I know there are people who will go, I forgot to charge it. But it is actually as true as that. Do you, Chris, live in a petrol station? Is your house in a petrol station? No, mine is. Well, at least an electricity station. So I am able to go out with my car 100% full of energy every single day.
But you have a drive, you don't park on the street. How do you deal with that?
Okay, and about 70% of people do actually have off-street parking. But for those who don't, for the 30% who don't, that's why we're investing billions into building off-street charging. 2 different types. One, plug it into your local lamppost. So what's called fast charging, but isn't super fast, but overnight it fills up your car. Massive investment into that. 2, rapid charging, which really happens at a very, very fast rate. Service stations.
So range anxiety is not an issue for you.
I understand why range anxiety is a thing. As long as you charge your car before you set off, I can tell you in 2.5 years of driving, I have not once been caught out. And in the last year alone, get this as a stat, there are 1/3 more rapid chargers. These are the really fast ones. And by the way, you can plug most of these things into a regular 13-amp plug.
And you've been to long journeys in Manchester? They're not city cars, these things?
No problem at all. Here's a fact. The average distance per week driven. Yeah. Guess.
By a car?
Yeah, by a car driver.
Per week? 100 miles?
Bloody good.
Is it?
96. Yeah. Well, you're very good at this. 96 miles. And actually, most electric cars now, I mean, the first generations were 60 and 80 and what have you. Most electric cars are doing 200, 300 miles.
You're on one of your smart motorways, and there's no hard shoulder. Do you worry about breaking down on one of your...
Yeah, first of all, I don't call them my smart motorways. They were invented by... installed by John Prescott.
You are the transport guy.
I am, but I'm not I object to be...
You say you wouldn't reinvent them?
As some super fan, I wouldn't have invented them like this, or I wouldn't have rolled them out like this. John Prescott introduced them, first of all.
Yeah.
And my criticism is, one way or the other, I think through lack of oversight, they were rolled out more and more without cameras, without the cameras, without the radar, without the technology required. So as soon as I came in, one of the very first things I did was ordered a review. It came up with an 18-point plan. We're over a year on from that. Not only are we doing on that plan, we've added more to it. For example, put the rescue areas in, put the cameras in, put the radar in, make sure the rescue areas are painted orange. A lot of people say, why don't you just go back to what we had? Answer is 1 in 12 deaths on our motorways happen on conventional hard shoulders. So there isn't, people think they're safe on the hard shoulder. Actually, it turns out they can be dangerous spaces to be. A better system is to make sure that we save more lives by having the right technology on the motorways. If you don't have them, and there's still the same amount of traffic, then about a quarter of the traffic might well decide to go off onto an A road and B road. And guess which roads are much less safe than any form of motorway, answer an A road or B road. So if you simply reversed out of this, you'd have to accept about a third more people dying on our roads, a third more people who would have otherwise used motorways, I should say. That isn't acceptable. So clearly we've got to find a sensible way forward. I've got a very good Select Committee report that's come in from the Transport Select Committee, looking at the moment. I'll respond in the new year.
LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods, planters blocking up roads and then creating new bike lanes. You're a cyclist. Do you understand the frustration, though, for a lot of motorists about these suddenly being imposed, mainly during lockdown, without a lot of consultation?
Yeah, I should point out I'm a very part-time cyclist. I haven't quite gone back on my bike since I came off it. But I'm not some sort of mammal, men in lycra. That's not that doesn't describe me. I don't think I own any lycra. What do I believe? Active travel, i.e., walking and cycling, clearly sensible. The average journey is about a mile. I mean, it's really very, very, very short. And I think it therefore makes sense to give people the option of not living in towns and cities which are only built over by flyovers, and you can't cross this way because there's a dual carriageway there and what have you. And I think we want to make the environment friendly to live in, not LA, if I may use that city as an example of a non-walking city. So I think it's desirable to have facilities for bikes and walking. I'm very proud to have put a lot of money into it. And we've seen a massive rise.
And that's the problem, though. Around the edges of that, there's some concern. Motorists are upset. They're moving the plant themselves, aren't they? They're trying to open up.
Well, I think, as you rightly say, around the edges. And I've had personal experience. I completely agree. I think it was covered in your excellent newspaper.
The Telegraph certainly have written about this a lot.
In my own Welwyn Hatfield constituency,
Correct.
One of the slightly surprising moves by the county authority was to A, turn one of the villages into a one-way, I don't know where that came from, and B, overplant it to the point where people couldn't actually conveniently travel. And I'm not in favour of any scheme, regardless of whether it's been consulted or
But your scheme set the money up, and then councils applied for it, and it all happened very quickly.
I'll tell you what I've done, and you're right about that. We were in the crisis, we're in the middle of the crisis. Remember, this was back in the days of coronavirus. We literally didn't know how many metres you really needed between people, so we were widening pavements, doing all sorts of what will now seem quite odd things, given what we now know. So there were some rush schemes. That was one of them, and they didn't all work. And what I've said to councils is, you must consult. You must find out what your population thinks. And by the way, I've been so harsh on this that I've actually withheld money from local authorities who haven't done it properly.
E-scooters, are they dangerous? Do you have one of those in your massive garage?
I don't have an e-scooter, no.
The law's funny, isn't it? So you
Yeah.
have to have a driving licence to go on one, unless you're in a trial area where you don't.
No, that's not right. You do have to have one. So let me just clarify this, as you say. First of all, e-scooters are a fact. You can't uninvent technology. Go anywhere in the world, you see them all over the place. What we want to do is have them, if we're going to have them used safely. So we set up trial areas, and in the trial areas, I think it's 30 or so of them, they've been very successful in as much as we've seen no fatality in those areas. They used, the last figure I saw was over 5 million miles. Many of those miles would have been done in cars otherwise. And they are insured. They are limited to 15.5 miles an hour. They have to be built to a certain quality standard. So my concern isn't the trial areas. My concern are the ones that are sold online, elsewhere, where people are buying them unaware that it's in fact illegal to use a privately purchased one, uninsured, etc., on the public road, and you mustn't use them in either case on the pavements. So people are buying them and essentially ending up actually on the wrong side of the law, and they're not insured, they're not built to the quality standards. So I do intend to use the law to act on that in order
to ban them from sale?
Possibly not to go as far as ban them, but to introduce quality thresholds which are every bit as good as the trial areas. And I'll be working with the police, with local authorities to have them crack down on this as well.
And just finally, and thank you for your time today, Grant Shapps, will you work out how to make seats more comfortable? Have you sat on those ironing board seats on the Thames?
You
know these seats?
Yes, you know it's my line.
It's your line. That's my line too.
Mine's Great Northern. It's run by the same guys. They tell me that the procurement, for some reason, was to have very thin seats.
Have you found the official in your department who specified that you must sit on an ironing board?
I have failed. Apparently, this is a very long time ago, and I failed to find the individual, but I completely agree with you. Comfort, reliability, trains on time, comfortable, Wi-Fi, warm in the winter, cooled in the summer. That is what we want from our railways. That's what we tend to deliver with Great British Railways.
Well, Grant Shapps, it's been great to have you here and talk to us on Choppers Politics. We're sitting here in Portcullis House in Parliament. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Good luck in fighting Omicron.
Thank you.
Well, do let me know your thoughts, listeners, if you're planning to go away before Christmas. Are you more likely to book a holiday now, given what Grant Shapps said there about insurance? Do you feel let down by changes to HS2? And importantly, are you a dog sitter in the wider Welland and Hatfield area who can look after the Shapps' elderly pooch, Mr. Crumble, and let them go on holiday somewhere? You can email us. We're at chopperspolitics@telegraph.co.uk or tweet us at chopperspodcast. Right, stay with us. Up next, I'll be talking to Brexit legend Mark Francois MP about a Christmas surprise he's got just for you, listener. Right after this.
Hello, I'm Brian Moore, the former England hooker. International rugby is back, and so is my podcast, Brian Moore's Full Contact. Every Monday, we get the biggest and best names from the world of rugby to dive into every ruck, maul and TMO decision. Get the inside track ahead of the next Six Nations and hear the likes of England coach Eddie Jones and the breakthrough star Freddie Stewart. Search for Brian Moore's Full Contact wherever you're listening to this.
Now, listeners to this podcast, and there are millions of you out there, are of course well acquainted with Brexit bloodhound Mark Francois, part of the pack of ERG Tory MPs who sniffed out the scent of a better Brexit deal way back in 2019 and wouldn't let go of it until they got it. This week, I thought I'd ask Mark Francois back to the Red Lion pub to reminisce about those days and, well, hear about a surprise he's got on offer this Christmas for anyone who loved Brexit. Mark Francois, welcome back to Choppers Politics.
Always a pleasure.
Was called Choppers Brexit Podcast when you first came on, but that's dealt with, isn't it? The Brexit's been finished and done, right?
Well, we've left the European Union, but to quote the Duke of Wellington, it was a damn close-run thing.
Now, we're talking, aren't we, in early December. We haven't yet seen David Frost trigger Article 16, and we thought that might happen after the COP conference last month.
Yes, I mean, I hope that the EU may yet be reasonable and we can come to a fair solution. But if they continue to be intransigent, then Frost has made it very plain on a number of occasions he is prepared to trigger Article 16, and you can't wait forever. And, if the EU simply won't play ball, at some point we should trigger the article.
Now, you are chairman of the European Research Group of Tory MPs. It's just you and me talking, no one's listening, not even the producers half the time. When might they trigger Article 16?
I don't think this can wait forever. If you keep threatening to do it and you don't do it, after a while you look weak. So if we're going to trigger it, I think we should do it within the next few weeks.
Before Christmas?
Ideally, yes.
Now, you've been busy, haven't you, during the lockdown? You've written a book.
Yes.
Now, that's interesting. What's it called?
It's called Spartan Victory.
Right.
And I wrote it in the lockdown. And it's basically about what I call the battle for Brexit, about the 3-year battle in Parliament and the media to honour the result of the referendum. Now, Chopper, the book was due to be published in October. And then my great friend David Amos was cruelly taken from us. So obviously I delayed the publication of the book. It would have been disrespectful to do it. But now that we've had both of the funerals and we're now into December, I think it is hopefully now appropriate to release it. And so the book will be published Friday.
This week, Friday.
And just to say, Chopper, I've actually dedicated the book Spartan Victory to my great friend Sir David Amos in his memory.
And who's the publisher?
It's self-published. I've done it through Amazon. I did approach, over the last year, quite a number of publishing houses.
How many?
A couple of dozen, I think,
right?
With the aid of a literary agent. in a nutshell, the problem is that the orthodoxy within the publishing industry is very, very much Remain. And I got some nice compliments about the book and the writing, but it became fairly evident after a while that no publisher wanted to publish it. So in the end, I thought, what do I do here? And I had a conversation with Nadine Dorries before she was the Culture Secretary.
Well-known, celebrated author.
Well, she sold about 2.5 million books, so she knows something about books. And I mentioned all this to her in passing, and she said, well, get it self-published if the story is worth telling. So I actually then started to look into that, and then that is the route that I went down.
I want to challenge you about this idea of a Remain dominating publishing industry. I mean, even now, 5 years after the vote, people are still saying they won't publish that because you're a Leaver and they support Remain. Is that right? Is that really right, or just in your head?
No, there was definitely an element of that.
What do they say? What kind of comments did you receive from them?
Well, I was getting it all second-hand through an agent, to be fair. So I wasn't... sorry, to enter a caveat, I wasn't getting this directly face-to-face.
I doubt you'd have taken it.
Well, no, but after a while, he just said, look, that this industry has a particular view of the world, and it's not quite the same view that you've got. So in the end, that's why I decided to go down the self-publishing route. And the point of the book is it explains what really went on. I've subtitled it The Inside Story of the Battle for Brexit.
Yeah.
So all of those shenanigans and arguments and plots that were going on in Parliament that the public could see night after night on their televisions, this explains to them exactly what was really going on behind
the scenes. First official account from an insider on the Brexit side, isn't it? We've seen a lot of books by Andrew Adonis and others who lost the battle, but no one's written it from the winning side, as far as I can make out.
Yes, as far as I know, having looked at obviously the other books that were available, some of which I've drawn on for reference, this is, as far as I understand it, genuinely unique. I was, in effect, the Brexiteer's de facto chief whip throughout all of this. And so I've given you the chief whip's insight for what was really going on.
Well, I have scanned it, and it is a good book. It does take you right inside those meetings of the ERG back in, goodness gracious, March, April 2019, when the world was caving in, it felt, in politics. Let's start at the beginning briefly. Why is it called Spartan Victory? Why on earth, what is a Spartan?
Well, that's partly down to my friend Paul Goodman. Everyone knows the legend of the Spartans, who, the 300 who died in the pass at Thermopylae. So they died in the pass. But fighting the Persians. But they saved Greece. And I was having dinner with Paul Goodman. It was between Meaningful Vote 2 and 3. And he said, this must all be getting a bit tough. And I said, well, sometimes it feels like the Spartans guarding the pass at Thermopylae, Paul. It was a throwaway comment. And he said, oh, I quite like that. I might write that up.
I can imagine you saying that.
And I said, well, feel free. And then we just changed the subject. And about 10 days later, he wrote this article on Conservative Home where he nicknamed us the Spartans, and your colleagues in the media liked the analogy and just picked it up and started to use it. So it all came from a throwaway remark over a meal, and now we've been nicknamed the Spartans, if you like, as the group who refused to surrender right to
the end. Because by the end there were 28 of you, weren't there? 28 Conservative
There were 28
MPs.
Brexiteer MPs. The crunch point was Meaningful Vote 3. There were these
Theresa May's deal.
Yeah, right. So the first meaningful vote, as it was known, the government suffered the biggest defeat in the history of Parliament since 1265. Then they had a second go. They then got massively defeated. And then you'd think at that point they would have learned their lesson, but they carried on. And MV3, Meaningful Vote 3, was the absolute climax of the battle for Brexit. And that day, 28 Brexiteer MPs, under immense pressure, and I go in detail into the book about the pressure we were under, still held our nerve and went through. And my contention in the book is that those 28 Spartans saved this country from becoming a vassal state. Now, that's a very bold claim, and if people want to know why I make it, they're going to have to buy the book. But basically, the withdrawal agreement was highly complex. It was 585 pages of verbiage. But what I've done in the book is I've decoded it, if you like, in layman's English. And I've explained to the reader why, even though it was called the withdrawal agreement, it actually did precisely the opposite. And it was designed very cleverly to keep us in the European Union forever. And it was only those, goggle-eyed wonks in the ERG that actually took the trouble to read this, realise what it really meant.
You formed a gang of lawyers to go through it.
We did, chaired by Sir Bill Cash, the so-called Star Chamber of analysts. Look, We read this thing, realised
Saw the problems, yeah.
and then fought it tenaciously because we knew what was at stake. What was at stake was the destiny of our country. I really believe that.
Some of the insider stories are interesting. What were the buddies, Mark Francois?
Right, the Buddies was the name that we gave to our own internal whipping team. We tried for 6 months to persuade Theresa May to change her approach at Chequers and to go back to something more akin to a proper clean Brexit that she'd outlined herself at Lancaster House. In the end, we couldn't persuade her to change her mind, so it became obvious that there would be a battle, in the voting chambers in the House of Commons, and for that you need a whipping team. So we created a whipping team which we referred to ourselves in private as the Buddies, and we beat the official government whip's office 3 times.
Now, to a layman, whips are, well, you say what they are. You're a former whip, aren't you? But you have a team of MPs working for the government who shadow a flock of MPs and make sure they vote the right way, and you are mimicking that for your ERG operation.
The whip's office is like the operations room of Parliament in a sense, and they have a HR function to look after colleagues, but their ultimate job is to get the government's business through. So because there were going to be crunch votes on the withdrawal agreement, which remember was a draft international treaty, we formed a whipping team of our own, knowing that we would have to fight the government whip's office. So that's what we did. I was the chief buddy. Steve Baker was the deputy chief buddy. And we basically employed similar tactics to the whips because I'd been the operations officer in the real whip's office a few years previously. And 2 members of the current cabinet were in the Buddies.
I'm pausing so you can say who they are.
Well, no, I'm terribly sorry. If you want to know that, you've got to buy the book.
And you do also recount some emotional meetings, don't you, before some of the big votes when you had to try and steel yourselves to walk through the no lobby with Jeremy Corbyn and his...
Well, there was an extremely emotional meeting of the 1922 committee 2 days before meaningful vote 3. So this is when the whole thing's coming to a head, Chopper. And this is when Theresa May intimated at the 1922 committee that she would stand down if we'd agreed to vote for it. But she wouldn't give any firm dates or timings, and the committee started to get a bit, irritated about that. And in the end, it became an extremely highly charged meeting with people shouting it. I've never seen a meeting of the 1922 committee like it before or since. And following that, the ERG already had another meeting arranged. We went to that meeting, and that's where Steve Baker gave this incredibly emotional speech, tears in his eyes. When he
bulldozing Parliament.
About bulldozing Parliament into the Thames.
Yeah.
I've
heard it, actually. I've heard there's a version out there, some bootleg version.
His speech is in the book.
Is it? The whole thing?
Yeah.
Has the party healed, do you think? We're five years on from Brexit. We're, 2 years on from that drama.
I think it's healed on that issue. I think there are now other issues that concern colleagues.
Theresa May, for example, who, you effectively ended her time early as Prime Minister, you and your Spartans, with your behaviour, what you did. Does she hold it against you?
She and I have never really had a conversation about it. I mean, I think, as I say in the book, I think Theresa May was earnest in what she was trying to do. I think she believed that what she was doing was right. We spent 6 months in private, jaw rather than war, trying to persuade her that she was wrong. In the end, we couldn't persuade her, so it was either surrender or fight, so we fought. I think in number 10 at the time, Brexit was seen more as a damage limitation exercise than an opportunity.
Which is the key problem of the whole thing. It does seem surprising, by the way, that these publishers don't think there's even a market for this book, given 17
Look,
points.
This is the biggest political issue in Britain since the Second World War, right? And this divided families. People would row about this over, the dinner table at home. But I was told there's no market for this anymore. It's all a few years ago. No one's going to buy this book. Well, I'm very much hoping your readers might prove those people wrong.
You might just get 17...
Well, I don't want to tempt fate by putting a number on it, but if 0.1% of the people who voted for Brexit bought the book, that would be 17,400 sales.
On that note, Mark Francois, author, let me say, from Friday of Spartan Victory, thank you for joining us this week on Chopper's Politics, and we'll put a link to how to buy the book in the show notes for this episode. Thank you.
Chopper, I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Well, that's all for this week. Listeners, thank you to my guests, Grant Shapps MP and Mark Francois MP. And of course, thank you to my producers who, contrary to what I said earlier, do listen into this podcast every week. Giles Gear, Louisa Wales and Theodora Luludis. But most importantly of all, thank you to you for listening. We couldn't make this wonderful podcast without Telegraph subscribers, so if you're not one already, and if not, why not, go to telegraph.co.uk/chopper to get your first month completely free of charge and have full access to all of our best Telegraph content, such as the Telegraph's famous, or perhaps infamous, Peterborough column, which brings all the insider gossip you need from the corridors of power every weekend, plus my Chopper's Politics newsletter, which delivers Westminster Whispers every day to your email inbox. The link to all these things are in the show notes of this episode, alongside the link to buy Mark Francois' Brexit memoir, Spartan Victory. Finally, always do buy a copy of the Daily Telegraph. It's great value and you won't regret it. Until next time though, cheerio!